How competitive should you be? I'm Tony. Welcome back to Street Ball Strategy.
But we never fade in this asphalt jungle games what we made. Laughter echoes, competition on parade. Shots fall like rain, friends not afraid.
Today we're talking about how competitive you should be as a basketball player. Now, for those of you who are familiar with the channel and know my kind of opinion in general when it comes to effort and trying, you probably safely assume that I'm going to say, well, you should be as competitive as you possibly can be. Because since I'm an all or nothing kind of person, my advice that comes from that is that if you're going to invest time and energy into anything, then you might as well go as hard as you possibly can if you're going to do and try to do that thing. And you would be partially right, but I think there is more of a kind of a sweet spot to find when it comes to how competitive should you be out here? The topic of competitiveness falls on a spectrum where you can be a super casual player where, you're not trying that hard. Winning, losing doesn't mean that much. And you can be on the opposite end of the spectrum where you're a super competitive, ultra competitive player where competition is everything to you all the time. And that doesn't just go for basketball, that goes in general life. Usually, even though I'm sure there are exceptions, in life in general, like off the court, you're either super casual when it comes to everyday life where you don't really care about competition, or maybe there are people who are super ultra competitive where they make everything a competition all the time. So today's question is, where should you fall on that spectrum in terms of trying to compete and grow and become a better basketball player? Speaking of that competitive spectrum, let's first talk about the pros and cons of both being super casual and super competitive. The pros of being super casual are that means just in general, your goal as a person, as a basketball player in life is just to have fun, just to enjoy yourself, right? You're looking to maximize your enjoyment doing whatever it is that you're doing. Winning or losing doesn't really matter to you, and therefore you're not really putting yourself into a position where you're ever really disappointed or ever really frustrated. Failure doesn't really exist because you're not really trying, you're just focused on having fun and enjoying yourself. Now, while I'm not really in that camp, I do kind of envy those kinds of players because all they care about is having fun and enjoying themselves. They don't care if they're not good, like not good doesn't even exist to them. All they care about is they're here and they're doing whatever at whatever skill level and it's fun. Even if they're terrible, they don't care because it's fun. I kind of envy that. Now, the obvious cons to being a super casual player is that without effort, without trying, right, there really is no progress. There really is no way to get better and improve your situation, whatever it is we're talking about. So if you don't care about competing, which means you don't really care about betterment, that means you're not really going to get better as a basketball player. And then in life, right, if you're not competitive, even with yourself, like if you're in school and you're like, I don't care if I just get B's and C's, that's fine. I'm not going to try to get A's and I'm not trying to get a scholarship. That's fine as long as you're complacent and good with where you are in life. If your situation in life is good with you and you don't want to do better, you don't want to get better, you're completely fine, satisfied, and happy, then not being a competitive person is completely fine. But when it comes to I want a better situation, I want better for myself, I'm trying to do better as a person in life or in basketball, then that's where the cons of being non-competitive and super casual come into play. You're not going to get better, you're not pushing yourself, so there is no improvement. And like I said, keep in mind, when we're talking about being competitive, it doesn't have to be always, you against other people or another person. It can just be you against you. So if you're trying to improve your situation, well, then you kind of have to compete with yourself, where you are right now, to do better than you have right now. And if you don't care about that, then you're not ever really gonna get or have or do better. But if you're cool, if you're satisfied with where you are, that's great. But no competition equals no trying, no effort, and that also equals no betterment. Now, the pros of being super competitive, ultra competitive all the time in life, in basketball, in anything, is that, when now you're putting out effort, you're trying as hard as you can all the time at everything. So when you put yourself out there like that, now you feel a sense of sort of accomplishment all the time. You're always trying, so you always feel like at least you tried as hard as you could to do whatever. And because you put in that effort, that now you have a sense of satisfaction and accomplishment that you wouldn't have if you just didn't ever try. I myself naturally fall more towards that end of the spectrum because I find for me, because I'm an all or nothing kind of person, I would rather give everything I have every day to my everyday life, including basketball, so that when I go to bed at night, I feel like I actually did something today. I at least tried today. I at least was productive because I tried today. At the same time, one of the cons of being ultra competitive is that because you're constantly putting yourself out there, that means you're also constantly exposing yourself to the possibility of frustration and failure. So the more often you try at whatever, the more likely it is that you're going to fail more often. So you'll have your successes, which when you succeed, feel that much more gratifying because of how hard you're trying. But you can't have that without the flip side being when you fail, it hurts and it's that much more frustrating. And because you make everything a competition, that means everything now is up for the possibility of you failing, of you being embarrassed, of you, getting frustrated because it's not going the way you want it to go. Also, one of the stereotypical calling cards of being an ultra competitive player, like when we think of the two most ultra competitive players in NBA history that are notorious for being ultra competitive, we automatically think of Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant. Now, while yes, because they were so competitive, they were also as successful as they were, but that comes with a price. When you're that competitive, that sort of takes over your personality and you pretty much, you become a bad guy to be around. Like, you're not fun to be around. When you make everything into a competition, even if you're just like hanging out with your friends, like those people that are that competitive, they can't chill. They have no chill. They can't just hang with their friends and have fun. They have to make everything a competition all the time. And because those people are exceptions, right? They're rare. Most people like competition sometimes, every now and then, because it makes things fun to a degree. But if you're that competitive where you make everything a super intense competition all the time, most people just don't want to do that. And they don't want to be around those people. Even their teammates don't like being around them, because if you're their teammate, then they expect you and they're going to push you to play and practice and compete up to their level, and if you don't, they will berate you and bully you until you actually live up or you quit. It is not fun being around those kinds of players when they are that competitive all the time. Now, like with Kobe, eventually he kind of calmed down and came back to earth and realized that in order for him to be as successful as he wanted to be, he had to dial that back some and not be so critical of his teammates and more supportive. But yet and still, both him and Jordan were so competitive all the time. Being around them was not something that most people wanted to do, because all they wanted to do was compete all the time about everything. Or at least, Jordan did. Kobe was more basketball focused, but like with Michael Jordan, it's legendary that he's just competitive with everything all the time. Like, you don't want to be around him and spend time with him in general, because he's going to force you to compete with him all the time, intensely, about everything. So now everything's a competition. It loses all of its fun just to spend time with him. So because you're constantly competing with him, he's either beating you at whatever you're competing with against him, or if you do beat him, then obviously he's going to be in a terrible mood now because of that. He's going to be pouty, and at the very least, because you beat him at a competition he invited you to. Like, he insisted that you compete with him, and then you beat him, and now he's in a terrible mood. Like, there's no winning. Like, there's no fun to be had being around people like that. That's a major con of being that ultra competitive. So now that we have a more clear definition of that spectrum of competitiveness and the pros and cons of it, let's talk about where I think is best, like most optimal for most players to fall on that competitive spectrum. So yes, my stance on how competitive should you be is that you should be as completely competitive as you possibly can be within two parameters. The first being, you should be as competitive as you possibly can, while at the same time having as much fun as you can. Because it doesn't have to be one or the other. It's not like, oh, you're either super competitive but you have no fun, or you have fun but you're not ever really competitive. It doesn't have to be one or the other. It can be both. Now, it will come at the expense. Like, you can't have super high fun and super high competitiveness. That's just not the way it works. So you're going to have to make a little bit of a concession where the competitiveness comes down a little bit, but just so that the fun can reach the same level, but they're still pretty high. It's just you can't have 100% fun and 100% competitiveness. That just does not work out like that. I'm sure there are some of you who are saying like, oh no, like being super competitive, that's the height of fun for me. Like when I'm as competitive as I can be, that's when I have the most fun. I'm sure some of you are saying that because there are exceptions and there are players like I could very well be one of those kinds of players. But I would say probably for most players, being ultra competitive also means like being super focused and super intense. And that just does not synchronize with having fun for most players. Like you can't have that much intensity and be having fun at the same time. It just doesn't happen. So for most players, you're going to have to make a concession where the competitiveness comes down a little bit, but the fun is also super high. So you're still very competitive, but you're also having a lot of fun at the same time. So enjoyment should be at the front of your mind whenever you're doing anything basketball related, especially when it comes to practice, training, and studying. Because the competing element, when you're out here competing in competition, you're testing yourself. For most players, that's just the funnest aspect of basketball. The competition part, the testing yourself part is the funnest part of basketball. But it's the studying and the practice and the training, doing that over and over again. That's where the fun level always comes down a lot. Especially the harder you go, especially the more often you push yourself. The problem is, it's the studying and the practicing and the training. That's where all the progress is made. You can make a little bit of progress over time by only ever competing and then trying to learn from your mistakes in real time. But it's the training and it's the studying and the practicing. That's where the majority of your progress is going to come from. If you want to grow as fast as you possibly can as a basketball player, it's going to depend on how much you practice, train, and study. And because that's not the fun stuff, that's why I say make having fun and having enjoyment be a priority. You need to figure out for yourself, for your personality, for your game, how to make training and practicing and studying as enjoyable as possible, because the key to progress is consistency. The more you enjoy doing those things, the more often you will do them, the more often you repeat doing them, and the more you do that, the more consistent you are, the more progress you're going to make faster. And when it comes to something like a passion where you love it and you're trying so hard to get as good as you can and you're putting in all this time and all this effort, you're also exposing yourself to the frustration of not growing as fast as you would like. And the harder you try, the more effort you put in, the more likely it is that you're going to get frustrated. And the more frustrated you get, the more likely it is that you're going to get overwhelmed by that frustration of not growing fast enough. And the more overwhelmed you get, eventually you're just going to give up. And when you give up, that progress that you were making stops completely. And if you're away for long enough, because you probably will eventually come back, if you're away for long enough, that progress not only will stop, but if you're away for long enough, it'll fall off. And you'll have to come, when you do come back, you have to reinstate all of that progress, all of that ability that you built. You're going to have to build that all back up over again. And that's going to cost you more time, way more time than it would have if you just would have made steady, slow progress. But in order to make that steady, slow progress, you have to actually enjoy the rigors of studying and practicing and training. The more you enjoy it, the more you repeat it, the more consistent you'll be, the faster you'll make progress. My second parameter for being as competitive as you can possibly be is that it's very in line with enjoying yourself, but in this case, we're talking about having the people around you have the very best experience they can have while they're around you in a basketball sense. I'm a Michael Jordan guy, but this goes pretty much the opposite of what Michael Jordan did. When he was around his teammates, right, he just pushed them. All he cared about was making them compete to the height of his level, and if he had to be a jerk to them, if he came off as a jerk to them while doing that, he didn't care. It was all about making them play as competitively as he was playing. I'm telling you to pretty much do the opposite of that, which is You need to have the people that you surround yourself with, teammates, opponents, whoever, especially in competition, whoever's competing with and against you, make it a priority that when they are with you, their experience with you is the very best it can be. Because if you take the Michael Jordan route and you're just a regular, normal, average, outdoor recreational player, but you're a jerk all the time because you're super ultra competitive, then people aren't just they're just not going to want to play with you. It's not going to be fun. They're going to start to avoid you sooner than later. But you need them. They're your competition. They're who you're measuring yourself against, testing yourself against. If you don't have them to test yourself against and to have them push you to get better, then how are you going to really get better? You need those people around you to push you, to make you better. If you push them away because you're super ultra competitive and you're a jerk about it all the time, then you're just not going to have anybody to perform, test, and compete against. So not only should you be trying to enjoy yourself as much as possible, but you should be trying to maximize everyone else's experience around you as well. You can perform at a super high level of competitiveness while at the same time maximizing everyone else's experience as well. You just have to learn and teach yourself how to do it. It's going to take trial and error to figure out how to go about doing that, but it is definitely possible. If you're thinking to yourself no, that's not the way it goes. If I'm super competitive, that means I have to dominate everyone and crush everyone into the ground while I'm playing against them, then you're looking at this from the wrong end of the spectrum. You can still be super competitive and make as much progress as you possibly can, while at the same time making everyone's experience with you the best it can be. You don't have to be a jerk to everybody in order to make progress. You don't have to dominate everyone and then, shove their noses in it and talk trash to them and all that kind of stuff to be able to make as much progress as you possibly can. You can make progress while still being a fun competitor to be around on a continual basis. And I say this from experience because when I was in my short prime as a basketball player, when I was at my basketball peak, my stupid attitude that I had back then when I was young was okay, I'm finally here. I finally reached my prime as a basketball player after 15 years of trying absolutely as hard as I'm finally here. So because I'm here, now it's time to make everybody pay. That was my attitude. It was okay, I'm finally good. Time to take it out on everybody. And while that seemed kind of satisfying for a little while, it soon gets to a point where you have less and less people who want to play with you, compete with you. I would show up on other people's courts and people that used to be there, they're not there anymore. And they're certainly not coming to my home court because they know if they come here, I'm going to run them into the ground because that's how hard I'm going to compete. And I'm going to be a jerk about it while I do it. So people stopped coming to my home court. When I would go to their home court, they would either not be there or they would see me arriving and they would just leave. They wouldn't want to play with me because I was a jerk to them. So it's not a stance you want to take where it's you have to be a super bad boy, dominant, beat everybody into the ground, and that's the only way you're going to be able to get better and make progress. You can have fun, and you can have them have fun, all at the same time while being super competitive and growing as a basketball player. Not only that, but when you take that perspective, when you show up to the court and you say, I'm going to be super competitive, but yet I'm still going to have fun, and everyone around me is going to have fun as well. I'm going to facilitate all of that because I'm intelligent enough to figure out how to do that, because it is possible. When you figure out how to do it, now that's a win-win for everybody all the time. There is no downside to that. You just have to figure out how to make it happen for you and your game and your personality. And the people around you, their personality, how they react to you. There is no loser in that scenario, because even when you compete and whoever loses that game or whatever it may be, they lose technically, yes, but they still had a good time. And because they had a good time, they want to run it back. And now you get to play again. And now they have a chance to redeem themselves and get better. And vice versa if you lose. If everybody's having a good time, which you can, then there really is no loser, because as you continue to compete, everybody's just gonna get better. That's how competitive you should be as a basketball player, and how to find that sweet spot on the competitive spectrum. Having fun, having a good experience out here goes hand in hand with growing and being competitive as a basketball player. There's no point in being super ultra competitive if you're miserable all the time, or if the people around you are miserable as well. And also, there's no point in like putting all this time and effort out here on the court if you're super casual and you're not ever really making any progress. Like, if you're enjoying yourself, then great. But if you're like most of us and you have the drive and motivation to actually get better, then if you're going to try to get better, then you should really, push yourself and actually have it mean something to you. But you don't want to push it to the extreme where like everybody's having a terrible time. You want to find that sweet spot where you can be competitive, get as many people as possible, enjoy themselves as much as possible. I know there are many players who just say, no, you know what? I'm just going to push it as hard as I can. I'm going to go as hard as I can. And whatever like repercussions come from that, like people not having a good time or me getting frustrated or whatever it is, because I want to be as good as I can, as fast as I can, I'm just going to push that competitive boundary as hard as I possibly can. And I'm telling you, you can do that and you can experiment with it, but I went over what's going to happen if you do that. It's not a chance that it's going to happen. It will happen as long as you actually are being that like hardcore competitive. You will not have a good time and you will give up eventually if you do that. So instead of going through that process of going really hard and then giving up and then coming back and having to rebuild your game all over again, just slowly make that progress by finding that competitive sweet spot. I give the same advice when it comes to people asking me about like nutrition and exercise. When they say, I want to like lose weight, right? It's like, okay, well, whatever diet you choose, like if you're trying to lose weight, then eat foods that are lower in calories, but you actually enjoy them. Like you have to find foods that are lower in calories, but that you actually enjoy so that you'll eat those lower calorie foods over and over again. And your body will have no choice but to lose weight. The same thing goes with whatever exercise you choose to do. Like whatever exercise it is, just have it be something that you enjoy. Experiment with whatever until you find exercises that you enjoy. And then because you enjoy them, you'll repeat them. And because you repeat them, you'll get better and you'll get in better shape because of it. The same thing goes with being competitive with basketball. So I want to thank you guys for watching. If you like this video, if you found it helpful at all, if you think it's going to help you become a better competitor or help you to compete, better out here, like at least have a higher quality of competition out here, then please subscribe to the channel. I don't know why I just said it like that, but either way, please subscribe to the channel. And let us know down in the comments, how do you find your balance between being competitive and having fun? Like, how do you find that perfect balance for you? Let us know so that we can try that as well. The more we share those thoughts with each other, the better players we can be, because the more we can learn from each other. But before you comment, make sure you hit that thanks button down below, because not only does hitting that thanks button highlight every comment you make, making it stand out from any other comment, but hitting that thanks button also directly supports the channel. So for anyone that does hit that thanks button, know I genuinely appreciate it. As always, like, share, comment like I said. Make sure you hit that notification bell so you're notified whenever any video goes live on this channel. And until then, see you guys next week.
Dribble down the lane, make the crowd cheer. Play it for the win, the joy is near. Every dunk, every pass, shout it loud. We're ballers in the park, we rule this playground.